Welcome to the Layer by Layer Poetic Features video for Psalm 110, a psalm we remember by the phrase, "Sit at my right side." Our goal is to reveal the distinctive beauty and power of the original text of Psalm 110 as the next best thing to knowing Hebrew yourself. The three poetic features are called Claimed and Confirmed, the Lord and the Lord, with a capital L and a little l, and Prophecy from the Pentateuch. We'll start with Claimed and Confirmed. Psalm 110's purpose is to assure the king that he will certainly be successful. A claim so extreme that it seems almost unbelievable. Repetition of structure and theme from the first half to the second half helps to prove or confirm at multiple levels of detail that God really did mean what he said. The psalm is structured in two parallel halves, with verses 1 to 3 parallel to verses 4 to 7. Both halves begin with a similar pattern: a quotative frame, or a means of introducing direct speech with the sound n, followed by the Lord's name, followed by the very words of the speech. In the middle of both halves, so verse 2 and verses 5 and 6, the psalmist gives more details about the Lord's speech in the previous verses, and he describes the extent of the king's powerful rule over his enemies through war. Though with different words, both discuss the king's rule over enemies. Both halves conclude, that is, with verse 3 and verse 7, by mentioning a nourishing water source. Dew, the small water droplets found on the grass in the morning, in verse 3, and a wadi, a small riverbed or stream that fills up after rain, in verse 7. In the ancient world, water was often difficult to find. The dew of heaven was a feature of a fertile land, blessed by God. In verse 7, the wadi has enough water to refresh the warrior king. We can summarize this pattern as words followed by war followed by water, which starts in verses 1 to 3 and is repeated in verses 4 to 7. The first time states or presents the claim of the oracle, that special message from God. The second time through confirms the oracle. It restates its message to prove that it is true. This repeated pattern reinforces the purpose of the psalm, to assure the king that he will certainly be successful. This is similar to when Joseph told Pharaoh about a dream with two forms of the same message. It meant the matter was firmly decided by God, and therefore could be trusted. This oracle, or special message from God to David, is trustworthy. The two halves are not identical, however. The second half of the psalm corresponds to the first half, but it also adds to the meaning. In the first half, the Lord invites the king to sit at his right hand, in verse 1, which gives honor to the king. In the second half, the Lord confirms the king's special status with an unchanging oath, a serious promise, in verse 4. And then the Lord is at the king's right side, fighting for him. Here, not only is the king's status confirmed as someone who has special access to the Lord's throne room, but then the Lord himself leaves the throne room to fight for this king. This is an even greater honor. In the first half, the psalmist assures the king that the Lord will enlarge his kingdom so that he rules among his enemies, in verse 2. And in the second half, verses 5 and 6, the psalmist describes these same events, but with language that is much more violent. The king's rule among his enemies is confirmed, and there is no hyperbole, no literary exaggeration here. This is not a pretense of ruling, in which the enemies still truly remain in control. The bodies of the enemy nations lie across the land smashed. The Lord has destroyed the enemy ruling structure and replaced it with his own. Also, in the first half, the psalmist assures the king that his army gathered before the battle will be like dew in verse 3. Like the many water droplets that shine on the grass in the morning, the army will have many soldiers and be amazing to look at. In the second half, the psalmist reports that after the battle, the Lord will drink from the enemy's stream or wadi, thus confirming his complete conquest. A good start, a strong and prepared army, is paired with a strong finish, a refreshed leader, confident and ready to continue. The first half of the psalm makes an astounding claim. The repetition in the second half closely follows the structure and content of the first half and provides poetic confirmation that the oracle is trustworthy. The small differences in the second half strengthen the confirmation, showing the high honor of this king, the gory details of his military success, and his readiness to continue his rule. First the claim, then the confirmation. Our second feature is the Lord and the Lord, with a capital L and a little l. In verse 1, the king is referred to as my Lord, Adoni, little l, as in my master or my superior. In verse 5, the Lord is referred to as the Lord, Adonai, as in the greatest master, God. In both cases, the Hebrew consonants are identical, although the vowels distinguish my Lord, little l, from the Lord, big L. The subject of verses 5 to 7, especially verse 7, is one of these two, but it is not completely clear which one. In their title, as in their actions, the Lord as in God, and the Lord as in future king, have overlapping identities. In verse 1, the king is referred to as my Lord Adoni, and he is invited to sit at the Lord's right side, his yamin. In verse 5, the Lord God is referred to as the Lord Adonai, and is said to be at the king's right side, again, yamin. These two participants, God as Lord and King as Lord, are thus described in almost exactly the same way. One can understand the king at God's right side as in the place of honor, and God at the king's right side as fighting for him, but the actual wording used to describe them is so similar that we need to look at it more closely. The relationship between Lord and Lord, or God and King, becomes even more confusing when we realize that, in verses 5 to 7, especially verse 7, it is difficult to determine which of them is the subject. In our exegetical issue, we conclude that the Lord is most likely the subject, because he is named as the subject in verse 5a, and there is no clear indication of a change of subject through the rest of the psalm. See the exegetical issues video for full details. The confusion arises when the subject is drinking from a wadi in verse 7. It seems difficult to imagine God as a warrior drinking from a wadi, which has led many to conclude it must be the human king drinking. If that is the case, then the human king may be the subject in earlier verses as well. The deliberate poetic similarity between the description of the two, Lord with a big L and Lord with a little l, indicates that anything that may seem confusing about the grammar here is likely a fully intended poetic feature. Repeatedly in the Psalms, as commentators such as Vanderloot have noted, it is a basic constituent of the overall framework of the psalm that God and the king are mutually exchangeable. That is, God and the king have a shared poetic identity in some respects, and each may stand in place of the other. The king is invited to reign on the Lord's throne. The Lord fights on behalf of the king. The king is at the Lord's right hand. The Lord is at the king's right hand. Their identities blur into one another, as we have seen in several other psalms, such as Psalm 2 and Psalm 45. The grammatical ambiguity of the subject seems to have been intentional. Both God and the king are valid subjects, because their identities are similar enough that each may act on behalf of the other. We'll now turn to our final poetic feature, prophecy from the Pentateuch. Psalm 110 is filled with allusions referring to two particular passages in the Pentateuch, Genesis 14 and Numbers 24. Both passages are understood as prophecies that speak about God's future plans, in which his king from Zion would defeat enemy nations across the world. Within Psalm 110 itself, as the first feature showed, extensive repetition served to confirm the claims of the oracle. The psalm itself is a combination of many different ancient prophecies. This shows that it is part of a long, unified tradition. David, the king, meditated on Torah, the law or the instruction, day and night. It is no surprise, therefore, that a psalm of David should be filled with allusions to passages in the Torah, also known as the Pentateuch. For example, you can see the allusions to Deuteronomy 33 in Psalm 4. Psalm 110 strongly alludes to these two passages in particular, Genesis 14 and Numbers 24, verses 15 to 19. Genesis 14 is the only other passage in the Hebrew Bible to mention Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who was also priest of God Most High. He brought wine and bread out to Abraham, and Abraham paid him tribute from his recent victory. This victory followed a great battle in which kings were defeated across the wide world. Numbers 24, 15 to 19, is, like Psalm 110, an oracle. And, like Psalm 110, the oracle in Numbers describes a staff that will come from Israel, smash the heads of his enemies, and rule. The word power is also used in Numbers 24. Psalm 110 includes an oracle of specific words in verse 1 and presents itself as a poem as divine revelation. Divine revelation based on and developing previous divine revelation. Like the messianic figure in Balaam's oracle, the king in Psalm 110 will conquer his enemies and rule from Jacob. This conquering is described with very violent language to convey the destruction of the enemies and the complete overthrow of their authority. Psalm 110 develops the messianic picture of Numbers 24 by blending it with Genesis 14. The Messiah will be, like Melchizedek, both king and priest in Zion, a figure greater than Abraham who would receive tribute as reigning king, and the one closest to God himself. Melchizedek was not himself involved in the battle against the evil kings, just as the human king in Psalm 110 is not very active in the fighting. For both, the battle was fought by someone else who did the fighting for them. Genesis 14 is thus read typologically. That is, it refers to something that will happen again later on a far greater scale. Just as the coalition of evil kings was defeated across the wide world in the days of Melchizedek, so too, when the new Melchizedek comes, the Lord, with the king at his side, will conquer the rebellious kings of the earth. The king may be sure that this victory will occur. This has been the Poetic Features video for Psalm 110, in which we explore the natively Hebrew poetic nature of the psalm. Our features were claimed and confirmed, the Lord and the Lord, big L and little l, and Prophecy from the Pentateuch. Our overview video provides a coherent interpretation of the psalm, and our exegetical issues video discusses other scholarly views. Please visit us at psalms.cdbr.org to learn more. Thank you.